as you know, we are memorizing the intermediate logic appendices over winter break. Now, for Appendix A is titled as Defining Truth Tables for the 5 Logical Operators. Now, the 5 logical operators are negation, conjunction, disjunction, conditional, and biconditional. And the symbols for these are called a tilde, a dot, a V, or horseshoe, and a triple equal sign, or a stack of pancakes, whichever one. And now these symbols are read as P, not P, P and Q, P or Q, if P then Q, if and only if P then Q. Now, my mom gave me this wonderful sheet that teaches you the exceptions to this truth table, which means you basically only have to memorize one sentence and you can per logical operator and you can memorize the whole thing. It's so much more easy. So we'll start with negation. Negation is the oddball out of all 5 logical operators. It does not follow the usual rules. So you'll notice that I did not write these columns. I'll explain what those are later. But that's because there's only 2 things your starting P can be. It can either be true or it can be false. That's it. Now, the negation always gives the opposite truth value. So if P is true, then not P will be false. And if P is false, then not P will be true. Okay, so that was the oddball out of all 5. So these 4 follow a similar pattern. So these columns that I wrote in pencil are just showing all the different combinations that P and Q can be. They can be both true, one or the other, all of that. So the middle column, which I'll write in this color, it shows what happens when those truth values are assigned. So what happens if P is true and Q is true? So instead of trying to memorize 4 different letters and order them in the right order, you can just memorize this sentence. The only way a conjunction can be true is when both P and Q are true. So P and Q are both true, which means it's going to be true. And then everything else will just be false. Okay, so next, disjunction. The only way a disjunction can be false is when both P and Q are false. So we'll go to the double F's, which stand for false, and that's when it will be false, and then everything else will be true. And then conditional. The only way a conditional can be false is when P is true and Q is false. So this one is a little bit harder, but as long as you just memorize that sentence, you should be okay. So you're looking for P is true and Q is false, which means it's going to be false, and then everything else will be true. And finally, biconditional. The only way a biconditional is true is whenever the truth values of P and Q match. So you'll see the double T's and the double F's. That is when it'll be true, and everything else will be false. So this is the full sheet that I have, and it shows the exceptions. So I'm just going to circle those to help us. So a conjunction this is the exception at the top when they're both true. So circle that. And then when disjunction, when they're both false. So that'll be right here. And then when one is true and the other is false. When P is true and Q is false, they're both false. And then when they match for biconditional. So this sheet is really helpful because you only have to memorize basically one sentence, and you can memorize per logical operator, and you can memorize the entire Appendix A.